more women here than men, right? But I said to you, Assalamu alaikum. I could have said, Assalamu alaikunna, which would be addressing a group of women. And so one of the sisters asked Dr. Shekhar, well, why is it if you have females and males together that we still say Assalamu alaikum when there's women? He said, well, it used to be a man's world. Yeah, James Brown. Yeah, he apparently had gotten into knowing that James Brown had that song, there's a man's world, but it wouldn't be anything without, a woman in this world. And so if you really look at the reality of the dynamics of the social set in America, you'll see how the powers that be, if you will, have purposely put women in a position of having economic power, having the jobs. You go to Office Max, you go to the different companies, women are in key positions and they're financially strong. And so in the Quran, there's a verse that says this. It says, and remember, we delivered you from the people of Pharaoh. They set you hard tasks and punishments, slaughtered your sons, and let the women folk live. That's what Yusuf Ali translated as. But I have it as translated as follows. Slaughtered your sons and used the lives of your women for their advantage. For their advantage. Therein was a tremendous trial from your Lord. So it's very important to know that when Allah uses a particular form of a verb in the Quran, it has a reason. There is a reason. There's a logic. And so in reality, what has happened is that the African American man, for sure, has been killed by the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant men, and they won't give us the jobs, but they'll hire our women before they'll give us a job in many instances. Okay, so what happens? The women get the jobs and become financially strong, and they say, well, I don't need a man. I'll just do like the men used to do. Go from woman to woman. And then the women say, well, I can go from man to man and have my, beautiful house, and every now and then if I decide I want a man, and, so be it. That's what has happened in society. I'm not saying in the Muslim, ranks in particular, but in the society as a whole, we see independent women who are career women who don't have intentions on marrying, having children, and nurturing a new generation amongst our people. So this is a strategy that Fir'aun used, and this is a strategy that's being used today. And the word yastayuna means to imagine yourself to be living. So a lot of times when people have material stuff and they got fine clothes and all of that, they think they're really living. But in reality, the real life is to have material and have spiritual devotion at the same time. That's what the real life is. You remember Muhammad told us years ago that you should have two legs, a spiritual leg and a material leg. And we want to be like the mountain. We want to elevate our spirit and our devotion and our piety as high as the mountain. And at the same time, we want to be so rooted and fixed in the earth with material might and material power. We as a community, we need money. How can we get the money? Just pursuing money, 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 like Snoop Dogg says, have my mind on my money and my money on my mind? that won't do it. Remember, Muhammad said one time, he said, you won't be able to do no more than what your spirit allows you to do. So I'm saying to you all, as I say to myself, if I want material acquisition, I have to have a spiritual devotion and a spiritual discipline and a desire to do good so that Allah will help me in my pursuit of the material stuff. And we know Allah says in the Quran, Hal jaza'ul ihsani illa al-ihsan. Is there any reward for good other than good? So sometimes, people have a tendency to look at people who study the Quran and who know out to Arabic as being wasting your time. You know, are you just reading this just to show off, or just to say that you have knowledge? But the reality of having the understanding of the Quran is for you and me to get the best out of ourselves from a spiritual, moral standpoint, and also give us the drive to access the material life. So I look at my life, and I look at the spirit that Allah has blessed me to have. When I did this book that I wrote, I would spend 2 hours at a time. I'm sorry, 2 nights at a time, 24 hours, 48 hours. I would get no sleep at various times to get this book out. And I often wonder, how am I so energetic? Why do I have so much spirit? And I believe it's because of the spirit that I was able to get from understanding some of the words of the Quran. It gave me the drive to do what I do in terms of teaching the language and writing this book. Many, many hours. I would say to you, I may have spent 12,000 hours or so doing this book over the course of the time that I was writing it. So again, the only point I'm trying to make now is that know that in order for you to become materially strong in a real moral way, you have to have a spirituality and a spiritual base to realize it.
Excuse me, brother. Question.
Yes.
I just want to go back a little. It also says in the Quran that men are the maintainers of women.
Yes.
Now, if you don't work, how are you going to maintain a woman?
That's right.
And it's your obligation to go out and get the firebrand and all the things that's necessary for livelihood.
That's right.
So by a woman working and having the initiative to climb the ladder of success, is this making men lazier?
I would say so. I would say so.
So how are they going to maintain a woman?
That's right.
This is where the conflict
So that's Satan's, effort to make the women the maintainers instead of the men, so that the men won't have any respect and regard, by the women. That's the plot that has happened,
And they can control, keep the African American under control.
I'm sorry?
And they can keep us under control by keeping the man down.
Yes, yes. And then they know that many women have a material interest, so if you just satisfy the women materially in the society, say, well, everything will be okay. And then these African American men, they won't be in competition for the real money and the real power. I think that's what has happened here. So let me just speak for a moment about Maryam. Maryam is the only woman mentioned by name in the Quran. And I take the position that the reason why is because in that one woman, Maryam, she was a model for all times, but amongst us men and amongst the prophethood from the masculine side, it took Moses, it took Abraham, it took Muhammad, and all of these prophets, where Allah says only one woman, Maryam, was the example for all of the women. And in the Surah 66, verse 12, here's what Allah says. And Mary, the daughter of Imam, who guarded her chastity, and we breathed into her of our spirit, and she testified to the truth of the words of her Lord and of his revelations, and was one of the qanitin, one of the devout servants. So this word qanitin is not feminine, it's masculine. So in reality, Allah is saying to you and I that Maryam was a prophetess. She was on the same rank with Isa and Moses and Abraham and all of them. And so a lot of the people who are male chauvinists, they don't want to, see the woman as being a prophet. All the men were the prophets. No women were prophets. And we know that's not true. Allah is saying that she was one of the qanitin. And the same word qanitin is used when it talks about a group of the male prophets in certain ayahs of the Quran.
Is that why the Catholics hold her in such high honor?
Mother
Mary.
That's a good connection, right? The Virgin Mary, the example of chastity and purity, moral purity. And from her came that moral, pure Jesus also. So, Maryam, the word itself, I studied it in the Lane's lexicon. And I hope one day the women will get to the point where reading this Lane's lexicon too, because it gives you the meaning.